Dave Carja, firstly just to say thank you to Adam and Kriya there for the beautiful music. Agrina Ushla, Vergade Falche chuig an Godal Specialta Shah and you. In an image play Stadus an Aliantora in Erin. Tá áthas gwil slú amór agin, crinathe le céile chun an ceis rí hábhachtach se a phlé. Tá na Halína agus cás an Aliantora mar phríomh husaíocht, dumsa mar ara. Sin an fág a bhroní mé an scéim filótach an income bunúsach na Halína. Is cínte gur ábhar misní dom na tóirthaí ar lerítar sa taide a dul siamar inniu do céad bhliana na scéime. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's conference to discuss the status of the artist in Ireland. I am heartened to see so many artists and organisations who work on behalf of artists represented here, and I'm very much looking forward to today's discussions. The work of artists inspires and reflects the rhythm of every day, as well as momentous events in public life. At home and abroad, the arts are the hallmark of our creativity as a people. I would like to say at the outset how important the arts are to me personally. All my life, I have loved the arts, especially music and our traditional arts, which have a special place in my heart. I have always known the importance of music and art in enriching our lives and enhancing our well-being. So it was a particular privilege for me to become minister with responsibility for the arts. I know that too often artists struggle for the level of income to meet even their basic needs. And that is why when I became minister, I was determined to focus on supporting professional arts practice. And while there is always work still to be done, I am pleased that this government has done more than any other in our history to demonstrate to artists that they are valued, that their work is appreciated, and that the contribution they make to enhancing all of our lives is understood. So while there is always more to be done, in the 4 years since I became minister, funding for the culture programme in my department has grown by over 90%. Funding for the Arts Council has grown by 68%. Funding for Screen Ireland has grown by 88%. Funding for Culture Ireland has grown by 65%. We have the new, highly innovative 3-year, 105 million Basic Income for the Arts research programme. Funding for national cultural institutions has increased by over 50%. And we are supporting the provision of new artist workspaces in Dublin City and elsewhere. But the signature innovation of this government in terms of publicly funded support for artists is the Basic Income for the Arts pilot scheme. Previous surveys have pointed to precarious incomes being all too common for artists. Therefore, the delivery of the Basic Income for the Arts has been a key priority for me. I believe that this is a once-in-a-generation policy intervention that has the potential to transform lives of artists. Income precarity is, of course, an issue for artists across the world. Last year, the European Parliament adopted a proposal for an EU framework to improve the living and working conditions for cultural and creative workers. I am proud that Ireland is leading the way in terms of research into supports that can make the pursuit of a creative career possible. I know from many engagements with international colleagues that the world is watching what we are doing here in Ireland. I was invited to Westminster to talk to them about the pilot and have spoken to the New Zealand Minister for Culture. Today, I am publishing a paper analysing the impact of the basic income over the first full year since its inception. The research shows that positive impacts for those receiving the payment materialised fairly quickly within the first 6 months of the pilot. A year on, the Basic Income for the Arts payment is having a consistent, positive impact across almost all indicators, affecting practice development, sectoral retention, well-being and deprivation. To give a few examples, each week the BIA recipients spend 8 hours more on their practice. They spend less time working in other sectors. Recipients are more likely than the control group to be able to sustain themselves through arts work alone. Life satisfaction increased for the BIA recipients compared to the control group. depression and anxiety decreased for recipients. Recipients were less likely to have difficulty making ends meet compared to the control group. Recipients invest each month €550 more than the control group in their practice, namely on equipment and materials, advertising and marketing, workspaces and work travel. Recipients are more likely to have completed new works in the previous 6 months. So while it is still relatively early in the research phase of the Basic Income for the Arts pilot scheme, it is clear that the support is having a positive impact. Artists in receipt of the support are typically able to devote more time to their art, have a boost to their well-being through greater life satisfaction and reduced anxiety, and are protected from the precariousness of incomes in the sector to a greater degree than those who are not receiving the support. I am regularly approached by artists participating in the scheme, and you will see on the screens today some of the hundreds of comments the research team have received from participants. Feedback from them in terms of the impact that support is having is unfailingly positive. And that is why I would like to see this scheme expanded to more and more artists. The research my department is doing during the pilot will be key in providing a strong evidence base for its continuation. Another issue that I think is timely to discuss is that of freedom of expression for artists. This has become particularly relevant with the ongoing conflict in Gaza, and many Irish artists have taken strong positions boycotting and withdrawing from events in response to the crisis. The Irish government, along with Spain and Norway, will tomorrow formally recognise the state of Palestine. This is a historic moment for Palestine, one that chimes with our own history in Ireland, when in 1919 we asked the world to recognise our status as an independent state and our right to self-determination. Our recognition of Palestine as a state is a strong statement that we wish the same for the people of Palestine. And I want to reiterate the utmost respect I have for artists' freedom of expression, which is fundamental to their role as agents of change in society. Freedom of expressions for artists is an essential part of a properly functioning democracy. And it is essential for us to have a diversity of voices and people willing to hold a lens up to society and reflect back what is happening. The timing of today's conference is really useful as we look to the development of a new cultural policy to build on Culture 2025. Culture 2025 is the government's last 5-year strategy, setting out the key priorities for the arts and culture. We are in a very different world since Culture 2025 was drafted, and much has changed post-COVID. I see today as the first step in the consultation process on the new cultural policy, and I'm looking forward to hearing your views on what are the key themes we need to focus on to create the best environment we can for artists working in Ireland. How we consume our culture, how we interact, the challenge of climate change and other global factors will all need to be considered in the development of our new policy. What are the challenges facing Irish artists, and what, more importantly, can we do now to create the policy environment to help artists thrive? I look forward to today's discussion and to hearing your views. Gur míle maith go léir.
Gur míle maith sin, Ara. Thank you very much for that, Minister, and so happy that you're here with us today. I mean, the findings which we will go through, some of them are astonishingly positive and some of them also give us challenges. But at the very outset, I want to pick up on something you did say within your opening address, which was you want to see this scheme expanded. The 3-year pilot scheme, no matter what may or may not happen in January or thereabouts, or maybe before January in terms of an election and a change of government, that the pilot scheme will continue no matter what happens. Am I right in thinking that?
It will. It's protected. It's a 3-year pilot. I think for me, when I say I want it to be rolled out, it's why not only the payment but the research element was so important to me. because I wanted to have gold standard research, to have the control group, to have the treatment group, to have the 6-month reports, so that it would have that strong evidence base, hopefully, in my opinion, irrefutable data, that it needs to be rolled out more extensively. And I suppose what I'm saying, although there may be a general election before the pilot scheme is finished, it will continue beyond that. It will complete its 3 years. And I can tell you it will certainly be appearing in the Green Party's manifesto, because I absolutely believe in this. I think we're a nation, and I see it as Minister for Tourism. When I go abroad on trade missions, what is there to present the image of Ireland? It's our dance, our culture, our creativity, our actors, our composers, our writers. You know, the list is endless. And we are a nation who promote that, who are proud of that. But I suppose because I come from that background, Sean, many a late discussion I had long before I considered entering politics with my friends who are involved in all walks of life within the arts about, we talk a lot, but are we really valuing the arts? You know, and suddenly I had this opportunity. It was never in my game plan to be Minister for Arts.
Was it the game plan then?
No.
To be among the artists?
I love being among the artists, and I think everyone in this room knows that. But I was never like, politics was, you know, I was a musician. I wanted to sing for my life, and suddenly I ended up here. Suddenly I ended up in this position. And I said, well, I'm going to do something about those late night conversations I've had.
We should mention, you mentioned the control group and the treatment group within that. There were 3,000 people randomly chosen to be part of the scheme. 2,000 of those received the basic income payment of, it's around about €1,400 a month, I think is paid. And then for the 1,000, I think it's actually 997, are in this control group. I want to give a special mention to them, and I think you probably would echo it. These are the people who, they got €650. They answer all the same questions that those who get the payment answer. They put in all the same effort in terms of creating that data. But as any statistician knows, without the control group, there's no hard and fast statistics. So they do deserve, I think, our deep appreciation.
Absolutely. They're the unsung heroes of the Basic Income for the Arts pilot scheme, because it's by comparing that we're getting that evidence, that we can see the difference of the payment.
I mean, you mentioned some of them there, 8 hours, weekly hours more, we can see there. One that really stood out for me, €550 more monthly spent on people's practice, and we have breakdowns of how exactly that is done. Out of a payment of $1,400, $550 is going directly back into the practice. That, I suppose, in itself creates more economy, more arts economy.
It does. Like it's about 40% of what they're getting a month on the basic income, and that's part of the argument as well for rolling it out more, I think, and extending the scheme because and expanding the scheme, because as artists have the space. And they move away from the precarious nature, the precarious income, they are actually investing back into the local economy. They're buying equipment, they're buying material, they're renting spaces, they're hiring other artists to help them. So that's, I think, that knock-on really needs to be explored too.
And another one that stood out from there is we look at satisfaction more than a half point higher, but that life satisfaction has some difficult statistics within it as well, and we will have a health and well-being panel later on, and I think we'll drill down a bit further into that. But I did want to talk with you specifically on some of those statistics, and I don't want to get bogged down in figures, but I think it is important that we actually use these, because that's what, hopefully, if there is a new government, these statistics will be one of the arguing points, even if you aren't there to make those arguments for us. There was also a European-wide survey that was used as a kind of a comparison purposes here, and that we will see throughout the day. You'll see it on the panel up behind us, SILC. And this is in answer to the question about making ends meet. People were asked, you know, how do you manage? Do I manage with difficulty? Do I manage with great difficulty? With some difficulty? Fairly easily, and very easily. Now, if you look at the top two panels, one is society in general, if you like. It's about 52% can manage to make ends meet. The second one is the treatment group, the people who are receiving the basic income. Again, in and about the same 52%. but look down at that bottom panel, which is the control group, as I said, to whom we owe so much, who are probably representative of the large body of artists. It makes for very difficult reading, doesn't it, to see how few can actually manage to make ends meet.
Yep. It's stark. The findings are quite stark, and that's an example of it. So it's making ends meet when you see how hard the control group is struggling to make ends meet. And obviously, there's an impact there on their creative output and on their well-being. So the very artists that we lean into for our well-being are suffering the most. So I again would thank the control group for their honest participation in this scheme.
Was there a tipping point? I mean, you spoke during your speech about this idea of, you had read reports and they were all saying the same thing about the precarity of the work, about the difficulty making ends meet. But was there a tipping point either, on a personal level where you saw people really struggling to maintain a career in the arts?
I think it was when I came in June, the end of June 2020, so COVID had hit us and all the doors were closed, the stages were empty, we couldn't hear music, actors weren't performing, no circus, nothing, and I think we all felt that as a nation, this is what life is like without our artists. And then in the series of engagements I was having online, I found it hard to hold back tears when I was engaging, and I must commend the national campaign for the arts in their engagement with me. And I think they had a really good motto at the time. I think it was like, no books, no poetry, no song, or no dance, no point. And that really resonated with me, because I was reading it, there is no point. But I suppose in every crisis there is an opportunity. So in setting up the task force to look at how the arts sector would navigate its way through. Post-COVID, the number one recommendation was the basic income for the arts pilot. And I saw an opportunity here that I needed to grasp with both hands very quickly. I just felt everything had fallen in place, because at the worst of times, this recommendation arrived when everyone, and I suppose my colleagues around the cabinet table, were at the most acutely aware of the value of the arts. And we have to move now, immediately.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the pilot scheme has to go through to the end of those 3 years. How do we guarantee that if the scheme is taken on in whatever new form, that money is ring-fenced, that it's not going to dip into the big culture pot, to those wonderful statistics you get about, you gave us about extra money to the Arts Council, extra money to Screen Ireland, etc. We don't want that dipped into. This has to be a separate pot, doesn't it?
Yes, and it is a separate pot currently. We have the basic income for the arts pot that is ring-fenced, believe me. I'm not sure it was. And I think that's the way it would have to go. You can't have the Arts Council, I see more in there, competing with the basic income for arts. You can't have our NCIs competing. They all need to be treated appropriately and fairly and supported, because everyone across the arts and our organisations and resource organisations need to be funded too, to help support all our artists.
And just to give you a few nice easy questions to finish up with.
Are you joking? Or
No, never do that. There was a Minister for the Arts back in the 1990s who created all of these arts centres around the country. And people define that as, point that out as a really defining moment in terms of the development of the arts infrastructure in this country. I think his name is Michael D. Higgins. Nice to be sitting up in Phoenix Park in 20 or 30 years' time. I'm not looking for you to declare your candidacy for the presidency, but do you see it as that type of landmark moment in terms of the infrastructure for the arts?
Firstly, say to be anyway mentioned in the same sentence as our Uachtaráin, and I think who was the finest arts minister we ever had, is an absolute privilege. I have to say that, Sean. I mean that seriously. Absolutely seriously. He was just the most amazing, transformative arts minister. So that's a compliment in itself. So I do think this is the game changer. This is a defining moment for the arts in how we are valuing them, and that's the essential part, is making sure it goes beyond the pilot. That's the next move.
And one other one. If things, play runs, they come to an end. I know this only too well from my previous career. And then you're not cock of the walk anymore. You're not even on the stage anymore. You have precedents in Senator Dan Boyle, who went off into the music world. So might we have Catherine Martin, in fact, performing for us at some point in the future? I was hoping you'd bring in something to perform for us today.
Well, look, I always sing all the time, so I will continue doing that whatever walk of life. But what you will have is, no matter where I am, I'll be fighting for this basic income for the arts to be rolled out.
We have a little bit of that. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We do have a little bit of fill time if there's a song if there's a song in you, because we have to get ready for panel one. But I should ask you about the Monaghan background, of course, being from the same county as yourself, but much further north than your South County Monaghan, different place altogether.
Yeah. South Monaghan's so fabulous, though, isn't it? Yeah. We won't go into the Monaghan fight. No,
let's keep that. We won't have an interfamilial squabble here in front of everybody. How did your growing up in Monaghan affect who you are now as Minister for the Arts and as politician?
I think my late parents, and I maybe didn't appreciate it at the time and growing up in Monaghan, my dad was an artist. My mum was someone who absolutely loved the arts and the language. My brother is a poet. We were all brought up at any occasion we were rolled out like the Von Trapp family to perform.
Which of them were you?
I did play Maria once.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I've passed that on now from my parents, that love of the arts, and have our 3 children now are rolled out at every occasion and they perform. But actually, on a serious note, that's another advantage to being involved in the arts, and I don't know, it's a really enriching experience to have had that without realising. I took it for granted to see my dad with an easel. To watch him, leaning like that. I can still picture him, God rest him, and painting. To see my brother recite his poetry. My husband, of course, is an artist as well. So, and now our children, he always says, I say my children. But they're his as well. They're our children. Our children watch him as I watched my father, and I think it's the most enriching experience. And I think without realising it, my parents brought me up to love. Absolutely love, and more important, cherish the arts, and it's lovely to be surrounded by so many here today.